Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Very Cold Lasagna podcast. I'm your host, DylanLasagna, and this is episode number 207 of this icy yet spicy podcast for all the filthy casual takes on the world of sports. And in this episode, we're here continuing along with our 2024 NFL season preview month as we're now on the back half of it talking about the AFC side of things, and we begin that side with the AFC East. So before we talk about the AFC East in this episode, we have some things to catch up on when it comes to training camp. Now, for the most part, training camp has officially begun. It is underway, but for some teams, most of them actually, rookies have reported. So not everyone is there. Not the entire team, except for one, has come over to training camp. So that team being the Houston Texans. So pretty much they got everyone in training camp ready to go, trying to prep for the regular season, and in this case, in a couple weeks, the preseason. So they're trying to get the ball rolling on this shit, and I respect them for that. So some other news and notes when it comes to around the league. So you have the rookies that have yet to sign their contracts, but they officially have as of this week, including quarterback J.J. McCarthy. He finally got his deal done with the Minnesota Vikings, and so have of the Bears, the number 1 overall pick, Caleb Williams, and the 9th overall pick, Romeo Odunze. So that quarterback and receiver duo, they are now on lock with the Chicago Bears. So elsewhere, you have a couple of notable players placed on the physically unable to perform list. So they'll either be out for the first 4 games of the season, or they'll be out for the entirety of the season. So big oof for those teams such as the New Orleans Saints with lineman Ryan Ramczyk on the offensive line. And so is another lineman for the Kansas City Chiefs, Joe Thuney. And then some unrelated injury news and contract news. Actually, it is a little bit of contract news. I contradicted myself. For my 49ers, this sucks. This is I don't know what the hell this guy's thinking. Brandon Ayuk. So with all this drama around his contract extension, at this moment, he has officially requested a trade. He requested a trade this past Tuesday, and now they're in a standstill. The Niners are not backing down. They're not going to trade him. They're not going to give him what he wants with the contract extension. So we're in this standstill with Ayuk's contract and Ayuk wanting to trade. He's not going to show up to training camp, so he's going to be willing to pay all those fines. Wow. Just wow. What a situation we're in with my team. Speaking of, rookie Ricky Pearsall was placed on the non-football injury list, so an injury that he incurred while away from the team, but it's been reported that the injury is not too serious, so that's the positive news. Hopefully he'll be able to get back with the team at some point during training camp. So that's good, at least a little bit positive, but again, not promising when you have the loser's curse of the Super Bowl looming large around your head for my 49ers. Big oof for my team already starting. So yeah, just a little bit of updates regarding some teams around training camp. If I have any more for you, I'll let you guys know. So now let's go into the main meat and bones of this episode, and that is our NFL season preview month part 5. And that centers around the beginning of our coverage of the American Football Conference, and that starts with the AFC East. So for the AFC East, the story of this division last year was pretty much almost the same as the year before and the year before that. So the last 2 years has pretty much come down to 2 teams in particular. The team down in South Beach and the team down in Western New York. And that team down South Beach, they had firm control of the division for more than half of the season, but they once again fell apart late, and in came that certain team from Western New York with their bullhorns. They beat them right to the punch and took it from them in the season finale down in South Beach. So they get the AFC East again for, the 3rd or 4th time in consecutive years, and then that team in South Beach, they have to go on the road in the cold-ass weather, and they lose a second consecutive playoff game. So now you go into 2024. All 4 teams have made a large amount of changes whether for good or for bad. And while one of them is about to begin a long rebuild, you look at the other two teams, looking up at the division champion in Western New York. They look like they're ready to compete and see which one of them gets to take down the 4-time division champions, let alone try and make a playoff appearance. But even then, you have to look at all three of these potential candidates, and you have to ask yourself some serious questions that need to be answered going into the 2024 campaign this coming fall. That being said, let's take a look at all 4 teams in this AFC East. Beginning the AFC side of things with our 2024 NFL season preview month is a team that once dominated this conference, but now they're beginning a long road back. Who knows how long that road will be? And that is the New England Patriots. The Patriots in 2023, they had a good defense that kept them close in some of their games last year. But offensively, they were pretty brutal. They were the worst part of last year because despite that good defense, they had a terrible offense. They had serious trouble with playmaking. They had serious trouble at execution, all because of the quarterback position. With their first round pick from 2021, Mac Jones, really doing bad. He regressed in a rapid pace from when you compare him from 2021 to just 2 years later. And then you bench him mid-season with Bailey Zappi, and he was no better. So you had this really bad quarterback carousel going on down in New England. So what do you add that all up to? A 4-13 finish and what ended up being Bill Belichick's final season as head coach over there. So they mutually part ways, and a fully new era of the Patriot way was in full effect. Gone was quarterback Tom Brady. He already had left 4 years ago for Tampa Bay, and now goes Bill Belichick, their winningest head coach in franchise history by a wide margin. So they replace him with linebackers coach Jared Mayo, clearly under the mentorship of Belichick. But yeah, he has plenty of experience with the team, but not a lot in coaching. So Jared Mayo clearly has a lot on his plate this coming season. So it'll be interesting how he does. Speaking of Mac Jones, you have to wonder, was he going to stay on the team going into this upcoming season? Were they going to give him one more chance to try and prove himself despite a crappy season, clearly? Unfortunately, no, that wasn't going to be the case. They traded him away to, of all places, the land of all elite, joining the likes of the Bucks of Suck, Kenny Omega, Will Asprey, Mr. Febreze. Yeah. Mercedes Monet. Don't forget that, folks. He joins the land of all elite, the Jacksonville Jaguars. He gets shipped off over there, and it's pretty much clear a sign that the Patriots are going to restart at the quarterback position. Kind of sucks. Kind of sucks if you think about it, but a little bit needed. So some other moves that they made, some key moves that they made, they re-signed Kyle Ducker, a huge part of that secondary, and one of the very few positives of their 2023 season. Receiver Kendrick Bourne, he was a kind of positive of their offense, but he got injured midway through with a torn ACL. And then tight end Hunter Henry, a touchdown machine for them, another positive for that offense in, well, very few of them. Some other moves that they made during the offseason, they let go Trent Brown in free agency, and so they also let go Ezekiel Elliott to the Cowboys. But in reality, Ezekiel Elliott wasn't really doing all that much to begin with the Patriots after he left the first time from the Cowboys. But they replaced him with Antonio Gibson from the Commanders, and coming over from the Commanders also is quarterback Jacoby Brissett. So Brissett already has some familiarity with the Patriot way, but he'll have to do so under a new head coach. Looking at the draft is where they did the most work, and obviously Brissett was going to be a placeholder for whoever's going to be the long-term answer at quarterback, and that long-term answer they're hoping for is quarterback Drake May from North Carolina. We'll talk more about Drake May in just a bit, but some of the other notable additions that they made in this draft was getting another receiver by the name of Jalen Polk from Washington, offensive lineman Caden Wallace, as well as Layden Robinson from both Penn State and Penn State respectively. and corner Marcellus Dial from South Carolina. So those were your notable draft picks from that draft class for the New England Patriots. And when I look at this Patriots offseason, I see a team that finally has their long-term quarterback, at least for now. But obviously they'll go short-term because from what I've seen from Drake May, from the Twitter clips and the Instagram reels, he has a ton of potential. He's very talented, but just like with quarterbacks like Zach Wilson and Trey Lance, they faltered so far. And with Drake May, it's clear that they don't want that from him. So what they're doing right now is playing it safe, which is a smart move. So far from what I read, sure, he's progressing very well in training camp. He started at number 3 on the depth chart, and now he's at number 2, surpassing Bailey Zappi. But obviously, they still want to play it safe. It's clear that they're going to go with Jacoby Brissett as the starter, regardless of what happens during training camp and preseason. So they're going to go easy on it first. Give Jacoby Brissett the starter reps all throughout the offseason and go from there, which is a smart move as Drake May continues to adjust to the NFL. And then while that's going on, the defense is once again going to have to carry this load for this team. Because, it's been the strong suit for New England, whether it's going to be under Bill Belichick or Jared Mayo. Because that side of the ball has some stout playmakers like Matthew Judon, Christian Barmore in the pass rush. And in the secondary, you have at safety Duggar and Jabril Peppers, who, again, for Jabril Peppers, had a Pro Bowl All-Pro type year last year. And, it was pretty much a dark year for New England. And then they're getting cornerback Christian Gonzalez back, who I thought was going to be one of the candidates for Defensive Rookie of the Year, but he had his year cut very short to injury. And then, the coaching of said defense is clearly not going to be as smooth under Jared Mayo as it was under Bill Belichick. But, it's his first year. There's still going to be some things to smooth out. So, for New England, you have you're going into 2024. You're starting this long rebuild. So your goal should not be a playoff berth, but it's to give your fans some positives, to give your fans some hope going into the next year of your rebuild. So give your fans something to be happy for in year 1 of this rebuild. So looking at some of the key games for the New England Patriots going into this year, if you look at your home opener against Seattle, you get your first look at this new look Patriots team. And then you go on a short turnaround to week 3 to play the New York Jets, only on Amazon Prime Video, and then another trip down west to take on the San Francisco 49ers. So the one thing I want to ask for this Patriots team is, when do we get to see Drake May? I did mention that, the best bet, the safe thing to do is, bench Drake May for as long as possible because, of his limited starting experience in North Carolina. Because, like I said, Brissett should be the starter come week 1, regardless of what happens the rest of the way with training camp and preseason, barring injury. So, at what point do you expect? When do you expect Drake May to come in and get some meaningful action? Because it's obvious the Patriots aren't going to be competing for a playoff spot. At least in my opinion, obviously, with how the NFL is, so many things can change. But with how the roster is constructed, the Patriots are not going to be one of those competing for a playoff spot. So, if that's the case, which in my opinion it is, you want to at least get your 3rd overall pick some meaningful games. Probably much later down the season. So, and then how does that supporting cast round out for whoever's going to be at quarterback? Because they're not going to have much to work with. Second-year receiver Demario Douglas was very productive last year, but we'll see how he can replicate that or do even better. He could be one of those breakout players. And then you have the rest of the receiving room like a Polk that was drafted in the 2nd round, and then you have Javon Baker, but we don't have any indications on how well they'll do at the pro level. And then Kevin Jabborin, who's coming off that torn ACL. Is he going to be as effective as he once was, especially coming off that kind of injury? So we'll see. But at least Jacoby Brissett is going to have a decent running attack with the returning Ramondre Stevenson, who is also coming off a serious injury. And then the newly acquired Antonio Gibson, who is pretty effective out of the backfield in the passing game. So overall, when you look at this Patriots team in 2024, I mean, the best thing to say is, well, embrace the rebuild. It's a completely new era for the Patriot way. Gone is Tom Brady, and now gone is Bill Belichick. They're still pretty minimal in various areas on offense, and that's pretty much what's going to hold them back for much of this year again. But the most important thing that Patriots fans should be seeing is positive progress. You want to see the development of your young players. You want to see bright sides in certain aspects of your team, especially whenever the time comes for your new potential franchise quarterback, Drake May, whenever he comes in. So for the Patriots, it's going to be a long year, but I'd say just embrace the rebuild as the year goes along. Now let's move on to the greener side of New York, where for this particular team, it honestly wasn't so green at all in the last year, and that was the New York Jets. So in 2023, things were finally supposed to change for these Jets when they traded for quarterback Aaron Rodgers from the Packers. And after all these quarterbacks that they had, it was like Sam Darnold, Zach Wilson, and then all the backups that they had to go through, it seemed like by getting Aaron Rodgers, it seemed like the Packers were finally going to make a run at the playoffs. Unfortunately, all that hope, all that optimism that the Jets and its fan base finally had, it ended in just 4 plays. On a Monday night against the Buffalo Bills, it all came crashing down. Aaron Rodgers was gone just in the blink of an eye with a torn Achilles. And right back they were with the quarterback carousel that has been haunting them for the last decade. And also, when it comes to this past season, the quarterback carousel of trying not to start Zach Wilson every chance they got en route to another 7-10 finish. So, sure, they tried to bring back Aaron Rodgers, but it just wasn't panning out as they couldn't make the playoffs. So they were hoping that Aaron Rodgers would get healthy during this past offseason, which he so far is clearly is on track to, but they're gonna have to be banking on his health all season long. So when it comes to this past offseason, they made some moves. They made some moves to try and better their team, like trading for edge rusher Hassan Reddick from the Philadelphia Eagles in return for a 2nd or 3rd round pick in 2026. But when it comes to Hassan Reddick, it seems like he doesn't have any interest in playing for this team. Kind of interesting when you think about it. And he's like, I don't know if I want to play here, pal. So already some dissension between Gang Green and Reddick. Woof. And then on the offensive side of the ball, the Jets want to better invest in the offensive line because that was a really big weakness for them. So they went out and traded for Morgan Moses from the Baltimore Ravens in return for this year's 6th round pick, and swapped some 4th round picks as well in this year's draft. So a key piece comes over to the offensive line and hopefully better protect Aaron Rodgers. So if you're the Jets, with what happened this year, you clearly have one goal in mind, and that is make the playoffs for the first time since 2010. It's been that long since they made the playoffs. And if you have a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, who could have had that last year, but he got injured, this year has to be the year for the Jets. Looking at some of the moves that they made in free agency and the draft, they lost players like Bryce Huff, Jordan Whitehead, and Bryce Hall, and then Quinton Jefferson. So mostly on the defensive side of the ball, but maybe for the Jets, they weren't as valuable to them anymore. So they added the likes. It was a mix between both the offensive and defensive side of the ball, like receiver Mike Williams from the Chargers. It was like, okay. It's a little 50-50 on that one, but we'll talk about why that is. And then defensively, you got Javon Kinlaw for the 49ers. In my opinion, it's a test. It's a test for Kinlaw because he had some moments, but he just never panned out for San Francisco. And then they continued to beef up the offensive line with John Simpson and Tyron Smith from the Ravens and the Cowboys, respectively. Both were pretty good linemen on their teams, but they do come with some concerns. More on that in a bit. In the draft, they continued to try and beef up their offensive line by adding tackle Olu Fasanu from Penn State. So that was a good pick there. And then they tried to beef up the receiving corps by adding Malachi Corley from Western Kentucky, as well as a running back by the name of Braylon Allen from Wisconsin. So when you look at all these moves for the New York Jets, and some of them are good, some of them not so good, but the thing I took away the most for this team is, well, their health. Their health is a serious concern for more than half of this roster. I mean, of course, Aaron Rodgers is the biggest concern because you don't want a repeat of last year, especially when it comes with less than four to five plays into the season. But yeah, he's still rehabbing from that Achilles injury, and it's just not just his health, but his age. He turns 41 during the season, and they better hope that he keeps up the play not just before the injury, but years before that. So he can still sling the ball, but they better hope he can still do that. But they also have to keep him upright and, have the proper talent around him, which could be a challenge. Because, starting with left tackle, Tyron Smith, he's very athletic, he's very bold. He was a really good protector, doing such with Dak Prescott in Dallas. But he hasn't played a full season in a couple of years, which is why they drafted Fasanu at pick number 11 for a reason. So they're hoping that Tyron Smith can stay healthy. They can develop Fasanu, or maybe use him in a rotation with Tyron Smith, or maybe use Fasanu somewhere else at maybe right tackle. I don't know. And then you look at Mike Williams. He was a big target for Justin Herbert in LA, but he's also very injury prone. And he's also coming off a torn ACL. They also put him on the PUP list. So he's not going to be available for the first 4 games of the season. So you're already down a starting receiver. This is not good for the Jets. Already not a good start for them. And then running back Breece Hall. At least he's the one that managed to stay healthy all year, off a torn ACL the previous year. But they better make sure he stays healthy, because that was my one concern from last year. Breece Hall staying healthy. It's also maybe a reason why they drafted Braylon Allen from Wisconsin, in case of emergency break glass situation. So when you look at the Jets, there's potential with this team, but their schedule is kind of tough. We're starting with week 1, you go play on a Monday night again. It's like maybe the NFL schedule makers had something against them. You go to San Francisco and play the San Francisco 49ers, the defending NFC champions. And then a couple weeks later, you go host the New England Patriots, the rebuilding Patriots. I mean, it should be hopefully no problem for them, right? On a Thursday night, only on Amazon Prime Video. But the biggest test for them comes again on a Monday night, where the injury happened. Just not in week 1. It happens in week 6 against the Buffalo Bills at home. For the Jets at least. But damn, they better hope that nothing happens in that game that's so significant on their team. So obviously, my biggest questions go back to the theme of this season preview: health. Because you have to wonder if Aaron Rodgers still has what it takes. That if he stays healthy, does he still have what it takes to get to the Jets a playoff berth? Because, he's getting older. He's not getting any healthier. But for the Jets, the most important thing that they need to do is keep this man healthy. And they also have to hope that he doesn't drop off, talent-wise this year. And I guess I'm repeating this question again. Can they all stay healthy? I guess that's just simple as that. Can they all stay healthy? Will they stay healthy? They all got to stay healthy. So there's potential for this Jets team to make the playoffs. They can go as far as the divisional. I'm not so sure about the AFC Championship quite yet with this team, because they still have one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL or of all time in Aaron Rodgers. And you also have a good receiving room when healthy. and one of the best defenses in the NFL. Let's not forget that. They have a very strong defense, especially in the secondary with Sauce Gardner leading the pack. But whether they can actually make it there is going to greatly depend on the word of the day, health, especially with Aaron Rodgers. And even staying mostly healthy should be good enough for this team to net themselves a playoff berth. But if they can't do that, then change is likely going to come, especially if you're head coach Robert Saleh. And, the word health is going to be the one thing that makes the New York Jets in 2024 the most unpredictable team in the NFL, because that injury cloud is going to be really hanging above them. So let's take our 2024 NFL season preview month down to South Beach to talk about the Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins in 2023 looked like the best team in the AFC at different points last season. And that sounds like a familiar thing the season before that in 2022, because the season in 2022 felt like the season in 2023 where they couldn't beat the teams that mattered most, and they fell apart again in December with some bad key losses and some injuries. Yeah, felt like 2022 in the repeat of 2023, if you get what I mean. Because, yeah, they eventually surrendered the AFC East to the Buffalo Bills in a Week 18 winner-take-all game, and when they had to play in the playoffs on the road again, they were one and done and fell to the eventual Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs in one of the coldest games in NFL history. So for the Miami Dolphins, you're wondering what the hell do you have to do to buy a playoff game, let alone a playoff win? Like, what were we doing wrong? What were we doing wrong here? Was it our quarterback, our head coach, something else on our team? What are we going to do if you're the Miami Dolphins? So it became clear your goal for this coming season is you still wanted the AFC East. You had to win that. And not only that, you have to win a playoff game. Is the AFC East and win a playoff game or bust. That's your goal if you're the Miami Dolphins this coming fall. So to get to that goal, some of the things that happened this past offseason, because there were some things that they had to do if they want to actually make some moves and then actually try to improve their team, they had to get into the green because they were in the red when it comes to money. So they had to release various players like corner Xavier Howard and center Connor Williams, so they could clear that cap space and spend. Although it was like very minimal spending. But they managed to extend receiver Jalen Waddle with a big fat 3-year contract extension, which he kind of deserves, I guess. So when it comes to free agency and in the draft, they did lose a couple of key players like in the pass rush, defensive tackle Christian Wilkins to the Las Vegas Raiders, which is, a big loss in the pass rush. And as well, in the opposite side of the trenches, Robert Hunt to the Carolina Panthers. So those were two things that they had to address in the draft, as well as losing edge rusher Andrew Van Ginkel to the Minnesota Vikings. And Van Ginkel caught on in the back half of last year, and he just unfortunately got hurt too. Some of the key additions for this team in free agency was center Aaron Brewer from the Titans, corner Kendall Fuller from the Commanders, so he should be a big help for Jalen Ramsey on the opposite side. And then Calais Campbell comes over from the Atlanta Falcons, as well as Odell Beckham Jr. from the Baltimore Ravens. So some more weapons for Tua Tagovailoa. Then the draft, that's where they did some of their dirty work, probably more of their better dirty work, if you ask me. Like edge rusher Chop Robinson from Penn State, one of, if not the top edge rusher in the draft. So he comes over to bolster a kind of lacking pass rush. And then continuing to address the trenches on both sides of the ball, they went out to get Patrick Paul from Houston. And then to try and better their depth at running back, Jalen Wright from Tennessee. And then they got another receiver by the name of Malik Washington from Virginia. So that rounds out those additions to try and improve this team. And when you look at the Miami Dolphins and what they did, I'd say it was decent. I'd say it was a decently balanced offseason. They expectedly made some cuts and let several players walk in free agency that were kind of getting there in terms of age or underperforming. So they just let them walk to shed some salary. But Miami made up for it with some solid additions through both free agency and the draft. They got younger, but also added some pretty valuable experience to their team. So the additions of Brewer at center and Patrick Paul in the draft as a rotational player, it should certainly help Tua's protection. And then when you look at the other side of the ball, the front seven will feature a somewhat new look, but hopefully a productively healthy one, as replacing the likes of Christian Wilkins, Andrew Van Ginkel, and as well as Jerome Baker are rookies Chop Robinson and veterans Calais Campbell and others. So when you look at the receiver depth as well, they should be better than last year, because when Tyreek Hill got injured late last year, and I believe he wasn't available in the game against Kansas City in the playoff game, there was barely anyone behind Jalen Waddle. Like, there was no names to speak of that you could come up with the top of your head. And it showed. It really showed. So signing Odell Beckham, and then you sign guys like Malik Washington and Dahaj Washington, they were absolute steals to better help the offense in the event that Tyreek Hill does get hurt again. So the offense certainly got better at particular areas with the offensive line and receiver depth. And I guess to a degree, the defense is a little bit more solid. So looking at some of the key games for this Miami team, you look at the two games against the Buffalo Bills. They come fairly early in the first half of the year. Against in week 2, you host them, and then week 9, you go on the road to face the Bills. So those are absolute wins that you need to get if you're the Miami Dolphins, that you got to avenge, because they got swept last year, which cost them the event that eventually cost them the division title. And then you go up to LA to face the Rams the following week, that you go to the Buffalo Bills, and then a key conference game against the Houston Texans could boom if the Miami Dolphins are in contention for a playoff spot or for the division title. Or maybe if they somehow win, they somehow win so much that they're in the positioning for the top seed, maybe even that. So when you look at the Miami Dolphins this coming season, my biggest thing is, like, can you win games against teams with winning records? You know, the actual legit teams, because the Dolphins, they have all this talent. They have a pretty good quarterback. They have a pretty nice head coach. The problem is that they play like frauds against the most legitimate of teams. That's why they get their ass whooped against the likes of the Bills, the Ravens, the Chiefs. Hell, they got beaten by the Titans, who are not a legit team at all last year. They were a losing team, and somehow they lost to them. So that absolutely needs to change this coming year if you want people like me to take them seriously as a valid playoff contender. So my other thing is, what is it going to take for Tua Tagovailoa to shine when the lights shine brightest? Because you're kind of the thing with the last question. How are you going to change the narrative of, you want me to believe that Tua is a quarterback that can come in clutch for this team? Because he's committed more turnovers than touchdowns against these valid teams. Now, there's a little bit more help around him, but just like with the team as a whole, he has to reverse course this year, especially when he's yet to come to an agreement on a contract extension with this team. So for the Miami Dolphins, their chances at a serious playoff run, at least this year, last year, they were derailed by injuries and yet another collapse. But they still have an opportunity to right the wrong in 2024, especially with the Bills team that's undergoing some pretty significant changes. And they've yet to figure out what they're going to look like this coming year. And for the Dolphins, their schedule is not too bad either. And they made some, again, solid improvements this past offseason. But staying healthy and then seeing if those additions and improvements, they execute on the field. And playing up to the competition will be key. So if they do all that, South Beach can be looking at its first AFC East title and its first home playoff game in a little over 15 years. So let's go back up northwest to wrap up part 5 of our 2024 NFL season preview month as we talk about the 4-time defending AFC East champions, that is the Buffalo Bills. The Bills last year had themselves a roller coaster of a season where they went from the talk of the AFC to potentially missing the playoffs by Thanksgiving at 6-6. I was one of those people that said, yeah, they're one of those that are likely going to miss the playoffs because of how crowded the AFC wildcard picture was. But no, they actually changed the narrative. Then they turned things around after their bye week by winning all their remaining home games. Home and road games, apologies, including a Week 18 finale in Miami to snatch away the AFC East from the Miami Dolphins again. So they get the AFC East and they get to host 2 playoff games as the number 2 seed. They're back in that position. And in their playoff run, they easily disposed of the Pittsburgh Steelers in the wild card game. And standing in their way, once again, if they wanted to reach the AFC Championship game, was the Kansas City Chiefs. Only this time, the Bills were on home turf. So when they came to that game, their best hopes of reaching said AFC Championship game and possibly the Super Bowl, well, let's just say it went wide right. Yep, that's right. The Bills' hopes once again went wide right against the Kansas City Chiefs. And I'm not talking just figuratively, but literally, because they're an extra field goal away from taking the lead or actually tying the game, if I remember correctly. But no, the Tyler Bass's kick literally went wide right. The words that no one wants to hear down in Buffalo. Yeah, it missed just like that. And the Bills were once again sent home packing by the Chiefs. So if you were the Bills, it became evident that something serious had to be changed. And unfortunately, one of those changes was not the head coach, Sean McDermott. So they did make some serious changes throughout the offseason if they wanted to make a serious run at the AFC Championship and the Super Bowl. So what they did first was name interim offensive coordinator Joe Brady as the permanent coordinator, replacing Ken Dorsey, who was fired mid-season last year. And they also promoted linebackers coach Bobby Bayich to defensive coordinator. So they actually didn't have a proper defensive coordinator last year, but now they do have one. So also going away is receiver Stephon Diggs. He got traded to the Houston Texans just during free agency in return for next year's second-round pick. So Stephon Diggs was actually not doing a whole lot after the coordinator change. And I'm a little curious why that was. Maybe it was an injury. Maybe something was not right between him and Josh Allen. Either way, what a missed opportunity between those two to finally reach the Super Bowl together and possibly win one. They also released various key players to clear their large salary cap bill, such as like Jordan Poyer, Sierra Neal, and Tre'Davious White. So those are a lot of players, especially there was a lot of players on that red salary cap bill that they had to clear out because, well, they weren't performing up to expectations anymore. So for the Buffalo Bills, some of the other moves that they made throughout the offseason, they also lost players like Gabriel Davis to the Jacksonville Jaguars, who I feel like after they gave him another contract, he didn't really perform up to expectations. I felt like he had that one good year in 2021, and then he fell off after that. They also lost one of their key edge rushers in Leonard Floyd to the 49ers, and then defensive tackle Jordan Phillips to the Giants. So one key piece of that pass rush is now gone, and were they going to try to replace him? We'll see. But they did try to replace Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs with adding the likes of Mac Hollins, Curtis Samuel, and Marcus Valdez-Scantling. They also added a safety in Mike Edwards from the Kansas City Chiefs. So at least you have some Super Bowl winning experience on that team. And then offensive lineman La'el Collins from the Bengals, or at least that's where he last played, because La'el Collins was out of the league for at least this past season, if I remember correctly. And then when you look at the draft, that's where they did their dirty work, and that's where they potentially could get their top receiver in Keon Coleman from Florida State. And then you look at other moves that they made, like safety Cole Bishop from Utah, so that secures Their deep back half of the field. And then defensive tackle Dwayne Carter from Duke, running back Ray Davis from Kentucky, and in center Cedric Van Pran from Georgia. So when you look at all the moves that they made, especially the at the receiver spot, because they traded away Stephon Diggs to the Texans, because this offseason for the Bills, it was solid. It was solid that they made some decent moves to try and address all the losses, all the cuts they had to make. There's still some questions to be had with this team. Again, one of those questions surrounds the receiver spot, because Stephon Diggs is one of the big names, and not just in the NFL, but especially for this Bills team. He was a brain trust for this receiver group, and especially for Josh Allen. And so is gone Gabriel Davis. So I don't know where the production's going to come from. They're going to try to replace him with Curtis Samuel and Keon Coleman. Coleman, being a rookie, he's going to have to get some reps in. But other than those two, there isn't much depth behind those two. And I mean, again, there's Mac Hollins, but that's pretty much it. And then when you look at the other thing, the Bills' injury-plagued defense from last year, it's a little bit stronger, before that disaster. But there's some questions up front with the pass rush with Gregory Rousseau and Von Miller, and then there are some things that that have to be answered when it comes to this Bills team. So looking at some of the key games for this Bills team that's trying to become a 5-time defending AFC East champion, and probably more than that. You look at the game in Miami in week 2. You're going to face the Miami Dolphins right away out of the gate and try to get a key divisional win very early in the season. And then you go back home to face the Jacksonville Jaguars and Trevor Lawrence and try to rack up as many key wins as possible, which continue along with a 3-game road trip against, even more but potential AFC playoff contenders in the Baltimore Ravens, the Houston Texans, and the New York Jets, all on the road. That's a daunting gauntlet when you still have questions about this team. Speaking of questions with this team, are they going to finally take off some pressure off of Josh Allen? Because the last couple of years, you could just say at this point, ever since Josh Allen was drafted by this team, they had to make everything about Josh Allen. And what I'm saying is, Josh Allen has basically had to carry this team off his back. He's had to do everything, whether it's whether it's be running back, whether it's like having to make some serious off-script plays, which is not a bad thing for a quarterback, but it's like you have to do every single time because your offensive coordinator can't dial up anything good for you. And it's not a slight at his previous coordinator, Ken Dorsey, but I just felt like ever since Brian Dable left, it's just like, damn, it's been something. There's been something off with Josh Allen. Like they had to do something to take some pressure off him, and I feel like maybe James Cook comes along at running back. Maybe the running back that they drafted, he suddenly breaks out. Maybe they form a 1-2 punch. But either way, they got to find some way to take some pressure off of Josh Allen. Hopefully Joe Brady dials up some plays to take some pressure off him, make him pass more. Don't force too many off-script plays where he has to run out of the backfield. It's like, just do anything to try and further prevent any injury risks to your franchise guy. Like, they're very fortunate that Josh Allen hasn't gotten injured, like, running the ball so much. Like, they're very lucky he's a tough dude out there. And then the offensive line, how's that going to round out? Because it was actually a very solid group out there. It's just a matter, they had some key losses via release and free agency signings, but they did manage to hold them up with some of those free agency additions. So it'll be interesting how that rounds out. So for the Buffalo Bills, I mentioned that they're paying the price initially when it came to their offseason a couple months ago, because they didn't get the job done in the playoffs and they had to let some players go because they didn't do such. but they picked up some solid pieces on both sides of the ball in free agency and the draft. So it's going to keep them competitive. And what's also going to keep them competitive is Josh Allen, of course. But they got to have better injury luck and not force Allen into doing everything himself in order to have an actual run at the playoffs and an actual run at the division title, along with several of their depth players to step up for not just their quarterback, but for the entire team. If they can do that, I feel like they can finally reach the Super Bowl that they themselves have been blocking from since that 2020 AFC Championship game. But if they don't do that, then it's probably time to give Sean McDermott the boot after this season, because it should have been done after the divisional loss back in January. And with that, that is a wrap on part 5 of our 2024 NFL season preview month. And in this episode, we talked about the Buffalo Bills, the Miami Dolphins, the New York Jets, and the New England Patriots. These 4 teams that reside in the AFC East. Which one of these teams are you rooting for? And what expectations do you have going into 2024 for either of these teams, or maybe even all of these teams, whether you're a fan of them or on the outside looking in on a neutral playing field? Let me know in the comments on YouTube or send me a message on social media via Instagram or Twitter at Very Cold Lasagna. So in the next part, we're going to be continuing along with our AFC season previews with the AFC South. So stay tuned for that one. But until then, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Very Cold Lasagna, episode number 207 of this icy yet spicy podcast with all the filthy casual takes on the world of sports. I am your host, DylanLasagna, and until the next one, keep the lasagna very cold in the fridge with your takes on the world of sports. And as always, peace out.